Arrowhead just buffed the GL-21 grenade launcher. It now has heavy armor penetration instead of medium. Hey everyone, in this video I'm taking the GL-21 into the hardest difficulty missions, testing it against every faction and breaking down how it actually works, where it's really strong and where one bad decision gets you killed. Luckily, the GL-21 is very easy to get. You can unlock it from the ship management terminal for 6,000 requisition slips. It takes up the support weapon slot and does not require a backpack, which already makes it flexible. The cooldown is on the longer side, but ammo is easy to sustain. You can resupply from ammo boxes or the resupply pod without any issues. You get 4 magazines total, 1 loaded in the launcher, and 3 spare mags. Each magazine holds 10 rounds. Most of the damage comes from the explosion, not the projectile itself. The downside, even with the buff, is that the GL can be awkward to use. It's harder to aim, has noticeable sway and recoil, and the effective range is limited, which means it doesn't forgive bad aiming. The GL-21 can handle both hordes and heavy single targets surprisingly well. After the buff, it can now deal with chargers, hulks, and other heavy enemies more reliably. You can absolutely run the GL-21 as your main weapon. If you do that, I highly recommend bringing a supply pack so you always have ammo. This setup works well, especially on longer missions. It's also a really solid option when you're sitting in a tank gunner seat. You can clear hordes fast and you can deal with bigger enemies trying to flank the tank. Just be careful with your angles because grenades can bounce off the tank itself. Also, for some reason, I couldn't grab ammo from my supply pack while in the tank, so I had to exit the vehicle to do that. Against bugs, pairing the GL-21 with a hover pack works extremely well. You let enemies stack up, pop the hover pack, and wipe them from above, where it's much safer. Another really important tip, the explosion can damage or even kill burrower-type enemies while they're still underground. One thing you really need to watch out for is grenade bounce. This usually happens when you hit heavily armored enemies at a bad angle. You need some distance because the explosion can easily kill you. To avoid this, aim low. For example, against chargers, I aim at the ground under their belly, not the armor itself. The grenade launcher can also destroy bot fabricators, bug holes, but not the big ones, and illuminate ships if you aim at the entrance and the shield is down. Before we move on, there's one thing. I want to quickly compare it to the GL-28. I don't actually own the GL-28 belt-fed grenade launcher, so I borrowed it from a friend for a short test. It also has heavy armor penetration, and it comes with 100 rounds, but you need a backpack just to carry the ammo. The fire rate is much faster, and you don't have to reload, which sounds great on paper. But from what I saw and from what I've heard from other players, it's actually much weaker than the GL-21. I've seen clips where it takes around 50 rounds just to kill a Bile Titan, which means it burns through ammo insanely fast. And against weaker enemies, it's not that impressive either. Even stronger Voteless can survive a direct hit. So personally, in its current state, I wouldn't recommend it. If you want to run a grenade launcher right now, the GL-21 is simply stronger, more efficient, and way more reliable overall. Against Terminids, the GL-21 really shines. I didn't test it against a Hive Lord, but against basically everything else, it performed extremely well. Aiming still matters a lot, but Terminids are very swarm-heavy enemies, and that actually works in the GL-21's favor. One well-placed shot can wipe out multiple enemies at once. It's also very effective against burrower-type enemies, even while they're still underground. The most important thing here is distance. You need to keep space between you and the target, and you need to be careful with charges because if you hit their armor at the wrong angle, the grenade can bounce. Against flying enemies like Shriekers, the GL-21 is basically useless. It's a bit better against the Dragon Roaches because they are larger targets. You can technically hit them, but it's not a point-and-click weapon, and aiming at airborne targets is very inconsistent. You can also destroy spore spewers and shrieker nests with it, which makes it very useful for objective clearing on Terminid missions, although its range is a limiting factor here. Against Automatons, I honestly expected it to be much worse, but surprisingly, it's actually pretty solid. That said, this is where the GL-21 starts to show its limits. On this front, it's definitely more ammo hungry, and you need to be more deliberate with your shots. Turrets are a good example. You really want to shoot them from below. If you just aim at armored parts, like the top or the head of a factory strider, it often doesn't work. It can deal with hulks, especially if you aim properly and keep some distance. But once again, flying enemies are a problem. You need something else against gunships. You can run it with a supply pack here as well, but personally, against automatons, I prefer bringing a shield pack instead, just to stay alive longer under heavy fire. Range is another big limitation on this front. Sometimes it's simply safer and more efficient to snipe heavy enemies and turrets from far away, and that's something the GL-21 just isn't great at. Against the Illuminate, this is where the GL-21 struggles the most. It can deal with harvesters, and it's actually very strong against voteless and flesh mobs. Voteless clump up nicely, and the explosions work in your favor. But the moment flying overseers enter the fight, everything starts falling apart. Hitting overseers with the GL-21 is extremely unreliable. You basically have to swap to a more precise weapon every time they show up. The problem is, while you're dealing with them, the voteless keep pushing in, so you end up stuck in this awkward loop. GL-21 for ground enemies, swap weapons for overseers, and by the time you switch back, the enemies are already too close to use grenades safely. Because of that constant weapon swapping and pressure, the GL-21 just doesn't feel good on this front. Personally, I wouldn't recommend it against the Illuminate. So overall, the GL-21 grenade launcher is in a much better spot after the buff than before. Giving it heavy armor penetration was a huge change. It turned the GL-21 from a niche crowd control weapon into something that can actually deal with heavy enemies, if you use it correctly. And a big plus is that it's not locked behind a war bond. Amazing against bugs, solid against bots, and a hard no against the Illuminate. So is the GL-21 worth using now? Yes, but not everywhere and not carelessly. It rewards good positioning, good aim, and smart loadout choices. If you respect its limits, it can be incredibly effective. If you don't, it will absolutely get you killed. If this video helped you or you found it useful, a like really helps the channel. And if you want more Helldivers, 2 tests and breakdowns like this, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.